Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session where we're going to be focused on developing our confidence at work. Now, this is such a topic that I feel very passionate about because confidence just seems to be the secret sauce to life. People who are confident seem to be more successful, be happier, get the things that they want. And yet, so often it's this quality that seems quite elusive. And I've definitely been on that journey. I've got lots of things to share with you in terms of what's helped me. But I do want to make this interactive. So I'll be looking for your input as we go. If you've not met me before, hello, my name is Melissa, and I specialize in helping those in the finance sector to communicate more effectively. I typically do a lot of work when helping people communicate with others, but there's a big chunk of my work that's involved and focused on how we communicate with ourselves. And when we're thinking about developing our confidence, so much of that rests on the self-talk, the beliefs that we hold, the habits that we form, and so on. I don't want to talk too much about me. My background is psychology. I'm a trained coach. I studied neuro-linguistic programming for many years. Our words really make our worlds. And so language has always been a source of fascination for me. I don't want to talk too much about me. If you like to learn more, do come and connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my profile on the other end of that QR code. And I should say that I'm also a recovering people pleaser. So learning about how to step out of my comfort zone and hold my boundaries and give people feedback have all been things that I've typically found quite difficult. And maybe there are some things that you find challenging too. In today's session, what I've planned to cover is we'll recognize, I want you to leave really understanding what confidence is and isn't. There are quite a lot of misconceptions and myths around it, which I want to explore and unpack. And I also want you to leave with some tools that you can implement straight away to increase your levels of confidence at work. So in terms of what to expect, as I mentioned, I'd love to get your input as we go, so it's not just me talking. There'll be some time for questions at the end. You can make those anonymous if you'd like. And I have created a PDF of the slides. So if you'd like those, there'll be a QR code at the end. You can just scan that and download them. The session is being recorded, so you can feel free to watch it again if you want to do that. And this forms part one. And part two is going to be at the AGM. So I'm going to be running a slot there, which builds on these ideas, but helps you apply them in more of the context that perhaps you're facing every day. So before we get going, I'd just love to get a sense from you, which is, if you had more confidence, how do you imagine that your life at work would change? I'd just love to get a sense of where are you wanting the difference to show up? Is it, for example, if you're managing people, you wouldn't feel so squeamish, let's say, about giving people constructive feedback? Or would you put your hand up or put yourself forward for more opportunities? Oh, thank you. Thank you. More opportunities of layered leadership. Okay. Trusting my knowledge so I can be braver with clients. Be braver giving opposing opinions. Okay, great. Less self-doubt, not spending time overthinking. Yeah, we so often do that. We sort of second guess ourselves and yeah, it's exhausting, isn't it? I can't hear anything, so I'm going to leave, but Anna, sometimes it can be helpful just to refresh, and that can really help. Everyone who registers, I'm imagining, is going to get the recording. I will send the link to the CII. So yes, I'd have a higher profile, which appears to be increasingly important these days. Yes, and sometimes we just don't want to put ourselves out there, do we? Because the more visible we are, the more criticism we can sometimes get. Yes. Thank you, Claire. Better connections with people in the workplace. Yeah. My message would be heard more. More confidence in dealing with difficult conversations with team members without overthinking the implications. Yes. Oh, well, thank you so much, everybody, for diving in with that. That's really helpful. Um, so let's start with looking at what confidence is and isn't. I'd like to imagine, or you to imagine, that I said to you, I'm about to bring someone on screen, or, if we were in a room together, I'd love to introduce you to this person. They're really confident. What would you expect to see if I had described someone in that way? What are you now expecting? Good posture, smiling and relaxed, at ease with themselves, engaging. Yes, standing tall, loud. Yeah, question mark. A man. Interesting. A presence, someone who commands the room. Okay. What a lovely collection. Being knowledgeable, gravitas. Okay. Well, I'd like you to take a note of what everybody's perceptions are of what we mean by confidence. Speaking with conviction, big body language. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So actually, when you look at the research in terms of what confidence actually is, I mean, a lot of the confidence is very dry and quite dull to read, but essentially, confidence is simply the willingness to try. It's the willingness to try. And so, really, what often comes before confidence is this sense of courage. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that as we go. When you look at the Latin, confidence means con, which is with, and fidere, which is trust. So it's essentially like we trust ourselves. We trust ourselves to handle whatever's going to come our way, and we're willing to step out of our comfort zone, edge out, and give something a go. Now, when you look at really what self-confidence is underneath it, it's this quality of self-trust. And I want to talk a little bit more about self-trust because it really is the ultimate life enhancer. It's performance amplifier, it's the success multiplier, it's all those good things I was talking about at the start. And there's a fantastic researcher called Dr. Sade Zare, who's actually just written a book, which I'm going to reference at the end. And she has defined self-trust as it's really people that possess self-trust separate themselves from are people who do versus those who wish. So it's this action orientated quality that we have. And Dr. Sade has created what she calls a doubt profile, which really can explore where the doubt resides in our system, because where when we can identify where it is, we can then pull and draw on different strengths to level up. And I will share this profile with you as we go through. So if self-trust is what we're looking for and what we want to develop, let's think about what are the ingredients? What's the recipe of self-trust? And her research, and she's very, very diligent in her research. Her book is very, very well researched. And she said she's got this 4A model, essentially. And the first driver of self-trust is this sense of self-acceptance. And this asks the question of us, am I enough? So when we've got lots of self-acceptance, we know that we're enough. We know in our body, we know in our bones that we're enough, without necessarily linking that to performance, achievements, outcomes, behavior. It's just this inherent sense of feeling like you're enough. The second is what we call a sense of agency. So this really asks the question, can I do this? Even if I don't feel quite ready, Can I do this? Do I feel like I've got the capacity to take that step? The next is autonomy. And this asks the question, can I shape this? Do I have influence over this? Have I got some say in how this goes? And then the fourth quality is adaptability. So this asks the question, can I handle these feelings that come up when we are in a challenging situation, when we have moved out of our comfort zone? Do we have the tools to be able to self-soothe, to regulate, so we don't get so flooded and hijacked by our emotions, which are extremely powerful forces? So as I mentioned, this is Dr. Sade Zare's work, and she's given me permission to share it with you and to share the profile. So let's look at each in turn. So those of us who are working with low self-acceptance may believe that we'll never be enough. Whatever happens, we'll never quite measure up. We're always just a little bit less than others. We tend to outsource parts of ourselves to other people's for other people's validation. So we can't accept these parts of ourselves unless others do. We believe that we've got to change who we are in order to feel valued, that we've got to overachieve in order to feel like we're worthy of attention or acceptance or love or all of those things. We, as a result, have to prove our worth. We don't feel like we have it inherently. So this is why we can, display all sorts of behaviors like likability, like people pleasing, overachieving, and things like that. So you get the picture. And this is why at work, those of us who have this low acceptance can really struggle giving and receiving feedback. So if we're managing people and we've got to give feedback, with those of us with low acceptance can really sugarcoat it, or we can really put it off. And we can, I'm speaking from acceptance experience here, we can just bottle it all up, and then it can explode out of us because we just haven't necessarily had the skills or had the awareness of how we work with low acceptance until now, that is. Or receiving feedback can feel very crushing, can feel a very scary conversation because we've tied our sense of self-worth to our output, to our achievements. And therefore, if there's any wrinkle of disapproval on that, it can feel very scary. So for us, it's really important that we do tease apart our sense of self, our sense of worth apart from our behavior. It also means that we can get into really, strong people-pleasing behaviors, finding it very difficult to say no, always putting other people ahead of us. It means that perfectionism can run rife because we want everything to be perfect, because that's how we are protecting ourselves. And negotiating can be quite difficult because it's difficult for us to hold our line. If we get pushed, it's hard for us to say no. Negotiations can feel like conflicts to us, and we don't necessarily like conflicts because we want everyone to feel safe, and then we can feel safe. We want to be liked so everyone else likes us and we feel safe. And again, speaking up in meetings, some of you mentioned that, it can be very difficult for us to put our hand up if we are then going to expose ourselves and show what we don't know. So those are some of the things in the ways that it could show up at work. All of these are very much workable, I should say. If you're recognizing, you're nodding your head, please don't feel overwhelmed. They are all workable with. Those of us who are working with low agency may believe, I'm just stuck. I can't do this. I can't handle this. I don't have what it takes to achieve my goals. I'm not ready. So we hesitate a lot. And this is often where the imposter phenomenon could show up, in the sense that we might have a really good, strong track record and everybody thinks, we are very talented and, we've been hired in this role, but inside we feel like we've only got that position through luck, timing, the fact that someone liked us, the fact that someone made a mistake, and we just go around the day waiting to be found out and exposed, and everyone's going to suddenly realize we don't know what we're talking about. And this sense of self-doubt is really, really is very strong. And yeah, as I mentioned, there's this big difference between how people perceive us, how our outsides appear versus how our insides feel. The thing with imposter phenomenon is you have to have a really good track record to suffer from it. It's if you're worried because you've never done something before, then that's just being an amateur. If you don't necessarily, people without the imposter phenomenon don't necessarily feel like they should know how to do it. They're just learning as they go. But people who suffer with the imposter phenomenon feel like they should know everything. And if they don't know an answer to this or they get something wrong, see that as evidence that they shouldn't be there. If you've been on any of my sessions before, you'll know I really don't like this term syndrome, which gets bandied around a lot. Syndrome is a set of medical signs and symptoms which correlate with each other and are often associated with a particular disorder. Now, I don't know about you, but that term syndrome makes me feel like it's a very fixed thing. It's something you're born with, and it absolutely isn't. It's really this experience of doubt, self-doubt. It was first researched by Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes back in the 70s, and that was the term that they gave it. So it's an experience of doubt, which again, we can work with. Those of us who are working with low autonomy may believe that we've got no voice. We might feel like no one really wants to listen to us. We don't have much power. Nothing I do matters. So it's just sort of like filled with resignation. And because of that sense of sort of impotence, as it were, all we feel like we can do is complain and blame others. And so unfortunately, that can render us, again, quite stuck. So you can see how these all relate to each other. And we might have the belief that everyone else has it much easier than we do. So yes, this sort of sense of life is being done to us. We don't necessarily have this drive or this energy to change our situation. And lastly, those of us who are working with low adaptability, often we feel a lot of overwhelm. Things just, can hijack us quite quickly. We avoid certain situations because we don't feel like we can handle the feelings that come with it. And we really often are of the opinion that emotions control us because we haven't yet learned how to regulate. So we're often very tense. We might look like we're a rabbit in the headlight often. And we can be a bit irritable because there's so much sort of needing to be processed in our system. So take a moment just to reflect. Is there any particular one of those attributes that needs strengthening? Often acceptance and agency are fairly linked. And often these will have sort of come through to us as these will be messages that we've absorbed through childhood. Now, what's interesting, I referenced this earlier, is that Dr. Sade Zare has created a profile. It's 12 questions that you can answer, which will really help to identify where you need a bit of support, but what you're already also good at, so that you can use that to bolster the other areas. And it's heavily researched and very rigorous. So I've created a QR code at the end, so you can scan that if you want to do your own doubt profile, because it's really insightful to find out what her view is on your situation. So now that we've had a sort of sense of self-trust, let's look at some common myths and misconceptions. So I think often we might feel that we need to be totally ready and then we'll take the action. So I need to feel confident before I do the thing. And those of us with low agency and sometimes low acceptance often are of this opinion. But as I alluded to, actually, confidence comes after we take the action, because then we have a proof point to ourselves that we can do it. So it's about taking action, even just a little step that can then start to get this confidence momentum going. I think the second myth, and one of you mentioned it, was that to be confident, you've got to be the loudest person in the room. And I wholeheartedly disagree with this because I don't think confidence has anything to do with loudness. I think it has more to do with extroversion. And extroverts typically, the difference between an introvert and an extrovert is simply where they get their energy from. So if you've had a tough day, do you want to come back and just shut the door, have a bath, and not really see anybody? In which case, you're probably leaning towards more introversion. Or do you want to go and see your mates and be around people because that's where you get your energy from? So it's not really to do about, confidence. You can be a very confident introvert. You can be very quietly confident. You don't need to make a lot of noise to express yourself or to feel like you have a place at the table. Quiet confidence is very powerful. So it's nothing to do with loudness. And then the third myth is that you can lose confidence. And we often hear this, oh, I've lost my confidence a bit. Well, you can't lose your confidence. You just lose your willingness to try. And I think that's such an important thing to keep in mind because let's say you were brave and you put your hand up to ask a question, and maybe the question wasn't formulated quite right. So it was a bit, blathery, and maybe you said a lot. And then you left that meeting going, oh God, I've really lost my confidence in speaking at big meetings. No, you haven't. You haven't. It's simply that practice. Practice again. It's about this willingness to try. Will you be willing to give it another go? And that's when you break it down and it's just about the next action, I think that hopefully will help you realize, it's much more doable. It's much more within reach than you think. So confidence comes after the action. Confidence has nothing to do with being loud. And you can't lose your confidence. You can just lose your willingness to try. And that's really often where the agency and the autonomy bit can creep in. If we're low in those, actually, that's where we want to bolster ourselves. So let's look at some tools now to help you develop your confidence. And before we do that, I just want to ask you quickly, do you think that your expectations shape how you experience the world? Yes or no? 100%. Yeah. Yes in caps. Okay. Well, I want to share some fascinating research with you that was carried out by a chap called Robert Kleck. And this was his question. He wanted to find out whether people did perceive or did go through the world having their expectations met. So what he did was he got two groups of people and he sent them out into the world to have conversations with strangers. And what he did was, with one group, he drew a big scar on their face because he wanted to see whether this actually was going to impact the conversations that were had. So he sent them out into the conversations, and both groups came back. And unsurprisingly, the group who had the scar reported that people were a bit cold, that they were a bit distant, which is not surprising because we typically do judge people by their appearance, unfortunately. But here's where it gets really interesting. Right before he sent out the group that had the scar on their face, he told them that they were going to just have some moisturizer applied to it to set the scar. But what they actually did was they removed the scar. So this group went out into those other conversations thinking that they had the scar on their face, but they actually didn't. And what was being observed, that these groups of people were being observed, and the observers didn't notice any difference at all in how those people who thought they had the scar on their face were being treated. So this really is so I found that such an interesting, powerful study in the sense that, it's our perception of ourselves. Our beliefs really do shape our reality. They didn't have scars on their face, but they thought that they did, and that's what they were looking for. So how you see yourself and what you believe about yourself, about what you deserve, about what's possible for someone like you, really does shape how you're going to be experienced. And this is down to what psychologists call our expectation bias, our confirmation bias. We go through the world looking for evidence to confirm what we already believe is true, and then we pay more attention to it. It's like how algorithms work. It's that's how our minds work. So we've got to really think about what is this story that we're telling ourselves about ourselves, and what are the labels that we've put on ourselves, and then are constantly looking for evidence to support that belief. So to reflect on this, you might just think, when you describe yourself, what comes next? Because that's the label. I'm a control freak, I'm anxious, I'm a people pleaser, I'm a perfectionist. And those labels are essentially what potentially need unpacking, because they might not be doing you any favors. And this is what I said earlier, our words make our worlds. So we have to be very attuned to actually how we're speaking to ourselves, because that's going to then direct what we pay attention to and what we let in. So if we've got something that we don't necessarily want, like a belief that we're a perfectionist or a people pleaser, how do we start to change it? And this is really what I want to focus on now, in terms of how do we start to strengthen this sense of agency, rather than just sitting back thinking someone's going to do it for us, or everyone else has it easy than we do. Like what's within our power? So as you probably anticipate, I'm going to be talking about action. So how do we start taking that first action? Well, I think for those of us that hesitate, often we haven't necessarily adopted this growth mindset. And a growth mindset is simply that where we experiment, that there is no failure, there's only feedback, that we'll have a go and we'll learn from it. Now, if you find yourself saying, oh gosh, I've never done this before, what do I do? No doubt you've probably faced a situation where you didn't know what to do before. And what experience can you draw on to help you overcome that? Yes, you might not have seen this exact thing, but what can you draw on to help you address it this time? And using the word yet can really profoundly shift how you approach something. Rather than I can't do it, is I can't do it yet. And that tiny little word just inserts a bit of a glimmer of possibility into what's available to you, what resources you could draw on. So remember, confidence follows action. So how do you take the first step? Think of it as an experiment. Think of it as a learning opportunity. Your sense of self-worth isn't on the line here. This is about what you can learn. Now, we might often get embroiled in lots of comparison. They're much further ahead than we are, than I am, all of those things. And just want to shine a bit of a light on comparison, because as humans, we do this a lot. We often take this evaluative approach to comparison, which asks, how do I compare now? And this is sometimes where we're like, oh, we're just miles behind. But actually, if you flip it and you take a more aspirational approach, which is, can I be like them? Then it can serve as more of an inspiration. And this is where we can then turn envy into emulation. So rather than feeling overwhelmed or a bit, down and out because you feel a bit helpless, actually think about how could I emulate? How could I emulate them? And I think if you're able to, when you're moving out of your comfort zone, start to reframe what this sense of discomfort means, we tend to be able to tolerate it more. So I'm sure that given you're in these roles and you're working at these big insurance companies and brokers, we don't necessarily like not knowing what the answer is. We don't love a lot of uncertainty. We would much rather move from not knowing to knowing, and that be a really straight line. But actually, that's not really what happens, is it? And when we're going up and down, and sometimes it's easy, and then sometimes we're in this pit of despair, it can feel really uncomfortable, frustrating, and sometimes a bit scary. But you see, that is the learning zone. That's the bit that if we're able to tolerate that level of discomfort, which is the adaptability skills, we're able to expand our comfort zones, we're able to grow the capacity in our brains. And this ability to tolerate discomfort is really where our edge is. If we don't have any tolerance at all for that, we can stay very small, and unfortunately, we're going to end up paying what we call the comfort zone tax, which can get quite hefty later on in life when you look back and you think, oh, I could have done that, and you didn't. And that's partly because maybe you didn't learn the skills to tolerate discomfort. So the number two tool for developing your confidence as you're moving out of your comfort zone is to build a recovery plan. And what I mean by this essentially is practice. Yes, you want to visualize it going really well. And what are you going to do if you make a mistake? What is going to happen if you forget your words? What are you going to do if there's a tech failure? When you can think about what you will do in those moments, this project or this presentation or whatever it is that you're planning to do doesn't feel so intimidating because you've already thought about what will go wrong. And Michael Phelps is a really good example of this. In the Olympics, it was for the butterfly race, I believe, and he dived into the pool and his goggles filled up with water, but he still was able to win the race because he practiced swimming it with water, with his eyes shut, and broke all sorts of world records. So think about when you've got your recovery plan, your confidence can increase because you're just that bit more willing to try. Tool number 3, use your body. Now, do you remember when I asked you right at the beginning of the session, I asked you what you would expect to see when somebody who was introduced to you as confident was in front of you? And a lot of you said tall, upright posture, smiling, had presence. So I would say the majority of those comments were all about what you noticed first was their body language. And what's interesting about body language is that if you take up space, you sit upright, you walk with your shoulders back into the meeting, or you're sitting on Teams meeting, make sure that your shoulders are far back from your ears as possible, that you are smiling, that you're making eye contact, because that's what people notice first. And first impressions, of course, are really important. But not only that, when you take up space, you're signaling to your body that you are safe. And that then can set up, it's like a hack, really. If you're worried and there's lots of self-talk going on, just change the shape and the position of your body to be more open, and you'll get the right chemicals going to the right parts of your brain, which will help you look more confident, and then it will help you feel more confident. The other tool is breathing. So as well as, standing up straight, when we have open body language, we have much more capacity in our lungs. And we also want to be breathing into our belly. So when we're very, very anxious and worried, our breath can get very shallow. And that's signaling to our body that, we might be in a fight or flight situation. And actually what we want to do is tell our body that, thank you for looking after me. I am safe. I'm simply doing a presentation. I'm simply doing something that feels a bit uncomfortable, but my life isn't at risk. So box breathing, I'll just explain it quickly in case you've not come across it. But essentially, you have to imagine like you're breathing around a box. So you breathe in and you hold it for 4. You breathe in for the count of 4, you hold it for 4, you breathe out for the count of 4, and then you hold it out. So you're just going around the box. And this is incredibly powerful at starting to regulate your system. So for those of you who, if you do the doubt profile and score low on adaptability, box breathing and belly breathing are your best friends. Belly breathing is essentially where you're putting as much energy, bring it down to your belly as possible and pushing out your belly so it's full of breath. And what we're doing here, again, we're just calming the system. And when our system's calm, then we're able to think more clearly, communicate more effectively, collaborate more easily. And that's the kind of state that we want to be in. So you breathe in, push your belly out, and then you want to breathe out slowly, almost like you were breathing on hot soup. So belly breathing can be quite useful if you're going into a scary situation. Box breathing can be quite useful if you're sitting in a meeting or something like that, and you don't want to be doing these big breaths. But box breathing can be quite discreet. Tool 4 is really helping you to catch those unhelpful thoughts that are going round and round in your mind. So Dr. Sade talks about these inner deceivers. We've got the classic judge, oh, you can't do anything right. You've got the misguided protector, which is, oh, this is too risky. You're going to fail. Don't put your hand up. Don't go for it. That's the one that will keep us stuck. The ringmaster, push harder. You need to do more. You're not enough. You keep doing more. And then the neglector, which is everyone else comes first. So those are the kind of general, the general committee inside many of our minds. But often when you explore this in any depth, what you might notice is actually, yes, the classic judge can be a real beast inside your mind, and yet its intention is to try and keep you safe. It doesn't want you to make mistakes because it feels like if you make a mistake, you're then going to be expelled, rejected, embarrassed. So if you're able to have that dialogue, which is, I can make a mistake and still be a competent person. It doesn't mean to say that I'm going to lose my job or be fired. You know, we can get into this catastrophizing mode, and it becomes really, stressful. The misguided protector, again, very similar, exaggerates these risks, keeps you safe but stuck. The ringmaster is tying your sense of worth to endless productivity. And this is really trying to protect you from feeling insignificant. You know, we want to belong. We need to feel important. And this is what the ringmaster has taken upon itself to ensure that doesn't happen. And then the neglector, this is, very common for us people pleasers, seeks validation, make sure everybody else is fine, and it's trying to protect us from the pain of rejection, which, for some of us is really, really severe. Just out of interest, I've been talking a lot. I'd love to know if there's any on those on that list that you're really recognizing. The neglector, yeah, very common. Yeah. So for those of us with the neglector as the main theme, part of our work is learning to say no, and that can be where we want to develop our confidence, ensuring that we feel valued enough to say no, to take up space. The ringmaster, yeah, ringmaster for me, yes, very, very, very common. So 6 words that have really helped me with those 4 inner deceivers are, I'm having the thought that everyone else is more important than I am. I'm having the thought that I need to keep pushing to feel safe. I'm having the thought that I can't rest until this is completely perfect. So what those 6 words do is they just help to separate you from your thoughts for you from your behavior. And in that space, we can then choose a different response. And tool number 5 really is to complete your doubt profile. So here is the QR code, and I'll pop it up again if you want to scan it. But essentially, as I mentioned, it will show you by asking 12 questions where you where you need bolstering and where you're already strong. So you can use that, for example, when you know what your traits are. For example, if it is saying no and your acceptance is high, how will that help you bolster the other bit? So it's a useful tool. Will you share the slides? Yes. So actually, if you scan that QR code, you'll be able to get the slides as well. So I think that was all I wanted to cover. I want to make sure that we've got some time for, yes, we've got plenty of time for questions. So hopefully you can now recognize that confidence is about the willingness to try. It's not about being the loudest person in the room. You don't get confidence by waiting around and it magically arriving. You get it through taking action. And this means, of course, that you can't just lose your confidence, you're just losing your willingness to try. And often, if you're in that spot currently, what are you making it mean? Maybe you're making some sort of feedback mean something about you and your sense of self. But actually, if you can separate yourself from your behavior, receiving feedback can be a much more productive and calmer experience when we realize it's not about our sense of self. It's not casting a verdict on our own value. It's about our behavior. And then the 5 tools, adopt that growth mindset. Think of everything like an experiment. It's what can you learn through doing this new thing? What can you learn about yourself? Build a recovery plan so that if something does go wrong, you've got it covered. Use your body and your voice. So take up space. Think about how you're going to use your voice. Practice if you need to. Often things sound much easier in our head until we have to actually say it. But use breathing techniques, box breathing, belly breathing, all of those things, really, really good at calming our system. Catch your self-talk. They are often those unhelpful thinking deceivers often sound like us. We think it's us, but actually they're just inherited voices that we've absorbed through our upbringing. And it's time that you had a different conversation with them. And do complete the doubt profile if you fancy going a bit further. So I'd just like to leave you with a quote. Some of you may know this from Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And he was a Holocaust survivor. And, he realized that, gosh, they can really take everything from you. You've still got your ability to choose. So between the stimulus and the response, there is this space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. So incredibly wise piece of advice. Here is the QR code again. So let's have some questions if anyone has any. Oh, so the slides. Oh, sorry. Let me just check. The doubt profile should be at the end of the slides, I believe. If it isn't, I'll send that around because there should be another QR code in the slides which show the doubt profile. Does anyone have any questions? Is there anywhere where this video will be viewable as a video? That's a really good question. Well, I'm recording it, so I actually could put it up on my YouTube, which if that would be helpful, I can definitely do that. So yes, I will do that. And I will make sure that the doubt profile gets circulated if you're finding it difficult to find. If it's not in the slides, it should be. I thought I checked it this morning, but I might not have done properly. Yes. Okay, that's absolutely fine. I'll upload it to my YouTube. Any more questions? Also, if you'd rather not ask me a question in this forum, you've got my email address there. Question coming. Okay. But I appreciate that this is quite personal territory, so you might not want to ask a question in front of everybody. I'm pretty sure you can make it anonymous, but Dr. Sade's book, if you want to read more about this as well, I think I mentioned it, it's called Big Trust. And so I've drawn quite a lot of points from there, research from there. Okay, sorry, the doubt profile isn't there. I do apologize. I will circulate the doubt profile. Thank you, Davina. For those who are afraid to speak up in meetings, do you have any tips on things to say? New starters to companies and industries might have not the knowledge, but new starters to companies and the industry might not have the knowledge, but want to build a skill. So my one tip, oh, thank you, Alice. Yeah, if you search doubt profile and Dr. Sade's name, it will bring it up. The one tip that I teach, and it works time and time again, is to get your voice in early to a meeting. If you've been in a situation where you've been in a meeting and you haven't said anything for the first 3/4 of the meeting, it becomes very difficult for you to say anything. I don't know if any of you have noticed that. But if you agree with someone early in the meeting, or if you ask a question or a comment early in that meeting, research shows time and time again that you will then speak more readily in that meeting. So if we're thinking about confidence in meetings, this is about the willingness to act. Can you think about even just agreeing with someone as a way to get your voice into the meeting? So I think that's the other thing, Claire. I think the other thing I would say is just be really prepared for the meeting. Find out what it's about. Then you can gen up a question, for example. So I think often people worry about speaking up in meetings because they feel like they might be asked a question they don't know or expose what little they know. And a lot of that, is down to, can be avoided with preparation. Yeah, no problem, Claire. I also think, sometimes it might be helpful just to set the tone of meetings. I do quite a lot of work with big corporates, and this is a very common theme, people worried about speaking up in meetings. And so I think if you're chairing a meeting, even if you were just to say, there are no such thing as stupid questions, that just really might help the dynamic of the meeting and also increase everybody's learning. When Google did their extensive research around what makes high-performing teams, the top ingredient that came back was this sense of psychological safety, which is this quality in teams where people aren't afraid to speak up. They're not worried about admitting that there's a mistake on something. They're not worried about being embarrassed in case people are judging them. And yeah, this sense of psychological safety does need to be nurtured, and I believe it can quite quickly accelerate with just a line in the setting of a meeting saying, no such thing as a stupid question. Great. Yes, thank you, Davina. How are we doing for time? Yes, still got a bit more time if in case people want to ask me anything. Well, I think I will stop there. As I mentioned, I will send the recording. I'll upload it to YouTube, send you the recording in case you want to watch the video again, and I'll send a link to the doubt profile. So you can, in the bit of time that we've got left, you could do it then. But thanks so much for coming along and being so engaged. Southampton Institute are always very engaging. So thank you very much. And yeah, hopefully I'll meet some of you at the AGM. So thanks again. Take care.